Good morning. I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you. Before moving to the agenda, I'd like to conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are present. Commissioner Diane Berman.
Present.
Commissioner James Alisi.
Present.
Commissioner John Howard.
Present.
Commissioner Dave Valesky.
Present.
Commissioner John Majori.
Present.
Thank you. Now, before we turn to the regular agenda, do any commissioners wish to recuse from voting on items 301 or 302? Commissioner Berman.
No.
Commissioner Alisi.
No.
Commissioner Howard.
No.
Commissioner Valesky.
No.
Commissioner Majori.
No.
Okay. We'll now move to the regular agenda. Our first item for discussion, item 301, case 15-E-0751, as it relates to the Distributed Energy Resource Project incentives. It'll be presented today by Marco Padula. Carleen Pacholzak, Peter Sheehan, and Dave Drexler will be available for questions. Marco, please begin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. Item 301 is a draft order in case 15E-0751 in the matter of the value of distributed energy resources, addressing a petition for reconsideration. On September 13, 2023, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA, submitted a petition to address what it described as unintended market impacts related to the Commission's April 2023 order in this proceeding. The April 2023 order established rules for transitioning from the community credit to the community adder within Con Edison's service territory. The community credit and community adder were established through various commission orders in this proceeding to provide incentives for community solar development. The community credit incentive was implemented following the transition of net metering to the value of distributed resources, or VDER. It is a per kilowatt hour incentive paid out by the utilities over 25 years as a component of the VDER value stack. The community adder is a per watt incentive paid to the solar project owner or developer by NYSERDA upon attainment of commercial operation. The community adder was implemented as the community credit budgets at each utility were reached, and the incentive structure moved to a statewide funding approach. It is a component of the New York Sun program upfront incentives. As noted in the petition, Con Edison filed a notice on October 6, 2021, stating that the community credit tranche was exhausted. However, due to project cancellations, community credits were unencumbered and recycled to projects that had previously applied but were denied. At the same time, NYSERDA awarded the community adder to a certain group of projects that were denied the community credit. The April 2023 order directed Con Edison to sunset the recycling of the community credit effective May 1st, 2023, and to permanently replace the community credit with the community adder. In that order, the Commission also set rules limiting the ability of a project owner or developer to select between the two types of incentives if eligibility changed due to the community credit recycling. The NYSERDA petition highlights impacts of those rules upon the financing of certain distributed solar projects and requests that the Commission reconsider the April 2023 order and provide relief to certain projects. The relief would be to allow projects a one-time option to forfeit the Con Edison Community Credit that was allocated after the exhaustion of the Community Credit tranche back in October of 2021. The petition identifies 46 projects in the New York Sun pipeline that applied for the community adder incentive after Con Edison's community credit was exhausted and subsequently were granted recycled community credit awards. NYSERDA further explains that 8 projects that were allowed recycled community credits and are operational have already received payment of the higher upfront New York Sun incentive amount, totaling $544,588 above the amount of which these projects should have been eligible. In its petition, NYSERDA proposes to reduce the New York Sun budget for the Con Edison megawatt block incentives and adders in that same amount, claiming that this would avoid negative impacts to ratepayers and any further market disruption. Pursuant to the State Administrative Procedure Act, a notice of proposed rulemaking describing the petition was published in the State Register on October 4th, 2023, and the comment period expired December 4th, 2023. Comments were received by American Solar Partners, Best Energy Power, Brooklyn Solar Works, City of New York, Con Edison, First and Second Housing Companies, New York State Solar Energy Industries, Solar One, and YSG Solar. All commenters urge adoption of the petition. The draft order before you finds that the petition and commenters have identified unintended consequences of the Commission's April 2023 order and warrants reconsideration of the rules governing the transition from the community credit to the community adder. The draft order finds that the proposal to allow impacted projects a one-time option to forfeit the awarded community credit and to instead receive the community adder is a reasonable solution for the projects that were impacted by the April 2023 order. Similarly, the draft order would allow the impacted projects to forfeit the community adder and instead receive the community credit, finding that switching projects from one incentive to another during advanced stages of the project development created significant confusion and uncertainty to project financing. The draft order also concludes that projects cannot receive both the community adder and the community credit incentives. Therefore, the draft order requires that if these projects choose to forfeit the community adder and instead receive the community credit, they should receive a reduced amount of community credit incentives to account for the community adder incentive dollars already paid to them. To effectuate this, the draft order requires Con Edison to reduce the term of the community credit for those projects that choose this option. In addition, the draft order finds NYSERDA's proposal to reduce the Con Edison megawatt block program to address the overpayment of incentives to be unnecessary. Lastly, the draft order requires NYSERDA to continuously review its internal controls and invoice review processes. This concludes my presentation. We're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Marco. The Commission's primary mission is to ensure safe, secure, and reliable access to utility services for all New Yorkers. And I find that this order is aligned with this overarching goal. in addition to the Commission's long-standing efforts to prioritize the development of competitive markets for clean energy resources throughout the state. Now, that effort in particular goes back decades and is rooted in ensuring that individuals installing distributed energy resources are properly compensated for the benefits their resources provide to the electric system as a whole. Where the original net energy metering approach served to initiate the development of new markets, the value of distributed energy resources, or VEDR approach, or the value stack as it would become known, became the new mechanism for compensating energy generated by distributed energy resources. And this approach excelled by taking into consideration the myriad of benefits these resources, such as solar, can provide. The value stack is more granular, more equitable, and more closely aligned with broader state goals. Now, since this change, the number of New York Sun program distributed energy resources in the state has increased significantly. My numbers are accurate by over 400%. And the change we're making today is as important as the changes made in our 4 previous modifications since its inception in 2017. Our program had created outcomes that were misaligned with expectations, and our action today addresses that in a manner that will allow the impacted projects a viable path forward. We have to remain open to evolving the program based on actual experiences in the marketplace. And as always, and as we're doing today, the Commission provides an important oversight and check on the implementation of our public policies to ensure we protect ratepayers. So thank you for your work in bringing this forward. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. I appreciate this being on the discussion agenda because I think it gives us an opportunity to sort of examine what might be just considered a technical process application of going from community adder and community credit, et cetera. I do agree with the chair that we have to be open to evolving with our programs and be responsive to that. In fact, we've discussed over the years different issues related to community adder and community credit and looking at what we needed to do to make them viable and workable. It was at the April 2023 session where there were 2 orders under this case number. One was an order that I dissented on related to load share modifications, and then the other was an order on the tariff modifications itself. And that's the issue that's before here today. Just as a personal technical notice on the agenda, I do have to point out that it's not clear looking at the agenda that we were looking at the petition for reconsideration today. And since it is a large generic proceeding with a lot of different orders, it is something that, I know I'm a broken record, but I just feel an obligation to point out from a transparency perspective because it does require, like it required me, looking and making sure that the right order underlying this was being looked at. But neither here nor there. Marco, I appreciate your diligent sharing of kind of the draft, summary of the draft order. For me, I have to pause because the thing that, there are really 3 aspects in here. One is that there were unintended market impacts and consequences from our April 2023 order, and that precipitated, in April was the order, in September, only 5 months later, NYSERDA bringing a petition for reconsideration saying, hey, there are unintended market consequences and we want you to reconsider this. And then the other issue is, and I'll get to sort of, my thoughts on these. The other issue was the internal control and the invoice review process that NYSERDA has, and clearly there was a operational issue that required, frankly, something that shouldn't have happened, which is there was overpayments that now have to be collected, and that raises a whole host of issues in terms of due diligence from an accountability perspective and what we're doing not only in the look back but also in going forward and making sure this doesn't apply in other areas. And then the third is that we are saying yes to this petition for reconsideration based on new info from NYSERDA. So as a whole, I think it is proper for us to make the change and acknowledge the unintended market consequences and reprioritize and frankly fix perhaps the error. And I say perhaps, why? I don't see that we have new information from NYSERDA. We have maybe new specific information from NYSERDA as to, yes, this really is going to have unintended market consequences. But if you look back to the April 2023 order, we specifically addressed at that time that there was a concern over whether or not we should give this sort of one-time credit with the community adder and the community credit, and looking at it in specifically in saying that, in April 2023, the Commission directed Con Edison to sunset the recycling and to permanently replace the community credit. The Commission also rejected the Department of Public Service staff's proposal to allow projects in Con Edison's territory that received a community adder but otherwise would be ineligible for capacity under the community credit tranches due to project cancellations, a one-time option to forfeit any community adder received, and then instead select the community credit. At that time, the Commission found this aspect of staff's proposal could introduce market uncertainty and confusion for developers. So we actually had that information. We had the sort of understanding that there were at least some voices who thought that there may be unintended market consequences. And we sort of said no, there were more market uncertainty issues if we did that, and therefore we didn't figure out a solution to the unintended market consequences. Only 5 months later, we recognized we got it wrong, and then it's come to us now to fix. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to take stock of the fact that every time we change something in our energy transition issues, we may actually have unintended consequences, whether it's technical consequences, whether it's market consequences, whether it's fiscal consequences. There are a whole host of things. And so as we move forward in the rush to get things out, we do have to take a pause and say, are we clearly understanding? Are we clearly taking a pulse on the affected stakeholders? And are we clearly listening? We're listening now, and frankly, when you see, there's no one, Con Edison is also saying, yes, this was unintended market consequences. So for me, I think we need to do a better job from the get-go. This isn't the first time we've had to sort of fix unintended consequences from our orders, and that's going to happen, but we should lessen that as we go forward by really doing more due diligence on the front end. The second issue for me is the internal control and the review process. If this was a utility and they had improperly, inadvertently overpaid, we would be doing a deeper dive into what happened, what they did perhaps wrong, and making sure that they get it right, but also really examining and getting under the hood. I have no doubt that NYSERDA is fixing the problem, but we do have an oversight responsibility to be very focused on this and make sure that this issue is a one-time issue and doesn't bleed into other areas of concern. We have a fiscal responsibility in terms of the oversight of the ratepayer dollars. So that's it. I am going to be approving this. I think it's really helpful, and I do think going forward, we have an opportunity to make sure that we have less orders that need to be fixed going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
No comments or questions. I will be supporting the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one comment to echo Commissioner Berman's point. As we put hundreds of millions of dollars through a variety of clean energy projects authorized by the commission with ratepayer dollars, the accountancy is going to be critical. I don't, we all agree we need more resources, financial resources to support these programs, so we can't afford any mismanagement or double payments in this case. So, to the extent that this order highlights the need for increased and ongoing scrutiny, which will be a never-ending process because this is the ratepayers' money, and we're also, while this may sound like a lot of money, it's really not that much in the greater context. But a little here, a little there can go a long way. But anyway, I will be supporting this, and I appreciate staff's work.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also will be supporting this item, and it certainly underscores the need for the Commission to continue to be flexible on a whole host of issues as we move forward. Marco, thanks for your work and your presentation. I just had actually one quick question. If you could just speak to something that's actually not in this order. It wasn't in the petition. It wasn't in your presentation. And that is this not an issue in the other utility service territories? And if not, I'm just curious as to why only in the Con Ed service territory.
Yeah, not an issue in the other utilities. They've all transitioned from the community credit to the community adder. I think it just had to do with timing of projects in Con Edison versus the other utility territories.
Okay. So we wouldn't see a petition forthcoming that would apply to one of the other
No.
utilities. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. And Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. And Marco, thank you for the presentation. I don't have any questions. I do just want to sort of echo the chair's comments. And from my perspective, in the broadest sense, what we're trying to do as a state is transition to a clean energy, which has never really been done before, never has been done before. And I think it's inevitable that as we create programs to achieve this goal, that we're going to have to make adjustments along the way. So I think that this order is fitting in order to bring a specific policy more in line with our broader state goals. So I also plan to support this item. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now do the call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to approve a one-time option for impacted distributed energy resource projects, as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. We'll now move on to our second item. Thank you, everyone. Our second item for discussion today, item 302, case 22-E-0137, as it relates to a modified New York State standardized interconnection contract for use with state agencies. It'll be presented today by Jalila Aisi. Jason Prouse and Sandra Sweet are available for questions. Jalila, please begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. The draft order before you would approve a form interconnection contract for state agencies to use when seeking to connect distributed generation, such as solar facilities or energy storage, with utility distribution systems. This form would be available to state agencies instead of the standard interconnection contract that the utilities use with private parties. The state agencies indicate that they are requesting a separate contract because they are unable to comply with some of the terms in the existing standard contract. The agencies explain that legal and policy restrictions prevent them from being able to agree with certain provisions of the standard contract, particularly with respect to indemnity, escrow, and insurance. The proposed contract provides alternative provisions to reflect the unique status of state agencies. It is similar to the form contract that was approved by the Commission in February 2022 for use with federal agencies. For example, the existing standard contract requires any disputed funds to be placed in escrow or subject to an irrevocable letter of credit. The state agencies explain that New York State Finance Law, Section 41, prohibits such actions as expenditures without appropriations. Instead, the proposed contract would allow a state agency to provide a utility with a letter of assurance upon the utility's request, confirming that it has adequate funds to cover the disputed amount. The contract approved by the Commission for federal agencies contains a similar alternative provision. The Commission's approval of the proposed contract would open the door for state agencies to directly own distributed generation and energy storage facilities on site, providing them with an opportunity to reduce their energy costs and increase their contributions toward the state's climate goals, which include targets for distributed solar generation and energy storage capacity. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the interconnection contract for state agencies as detailed in the draft order, and we are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jalila. It goes without saying that the goals New York has established through the CLCPA are among the most ambitious in the nation. New York has always sought to lead by example, and this order seeks to provide tools to further reinforce that leadership role by making it easier for state agencies to pursue distributed energy resources. Currently, state agencies' pursuit of DERs, they cannot use the existing standard interconnection agreement, and instead are left with a variety of suboptimal options. Each time they install a DER, they can either engage in a power purchase agreement with a third party, which limits the scope of benefits to any individual agency, or they are left with the burden of negotiating unique agreements with each utility, which leads to higher costs and a lengthened development timeline. Given the scope of the goals of the CLCPA and the direction laid out in the aptly named Lead by Example executive order issued by Governor Hochul in 2022, this order will enable state agencies to pursue a wider range of options and to do so more economically and more efficiently than currently allowed. Though progress may not move at a pace fast enough for some, this Commission actively seeks out opportunities to enhance clean energy markets, and this action is yet another example of our efforts to continuously improve utility processes. So, thank you. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. I will be voting for this item, but I do just want to talk about a couple of things. One, it is very similar to what we did in February 2022 when the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs petitioned us to allow them to have a form contract that they could use for their interconnection agreements. And I voted for it. I was supportive of that. I did note at that time that there were other parties who would also be interested in looking at the form contract and some of the challenges that presented. It specifically, in my mind, was thinking about states, but also the state, but also municipalities, et cetera. So it's a timely petition now to look at, and I'm glad to see that folks worked through the challenges with the state agencies in, getting this to us for a vote. I do recognize that initially the New York City was a petitioner and then withdrew from that without prejudice. Perhaps will come back looking for their own standard form contract. And that really is a larger issue of, does that apply just for New York City? Should we be looking at other municipalities, and what are that? But it is an opportune time to take a look at this contract, this order allowing the form to be changed will increase likely the opportunity for the state to own more DER itself because of that. So we do have to look at what are the unintended consequences as we look at not just the increase in DER, which is something we have to look at, but the unintended consequences of the state now being likely to be more of an entity owning DER. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I welcome any of my colleagues to comment on that broader policy issue. I will note that the state agencies do already pursue distributed energy resources through power purchase agreements. So I think the only difference here would be the direct ownership and the use of the form contract.
Okay. I do think that the switch, kind of just looking at what we got off with 301, where it didn't seem like it was going to be a big deal, and then we realized there were unintended market consequences. I do think that as we are doing this order, we should also be looking now, assuming this passes, which I believe it should, now that we're going to be using this, now that this is going to be another different avenue from the power purchase, what are the things that we need to consider before we just rush into now using these agreements, signing it, and increasing our DER from state-owned? You know, some of the things about the state will be competing against low-cost hydropower used for economic development for most large customers. How does that impact? Will we be looking at it more for smaller customers? Will we be inserting ourselves and lessening market opportunity because the state is doing more DER ownership? Who pays? Ratepayers or private developers? Who's going to manage the long-term resource issues? What level of ratepayer benefits are there to the detriment of others? Will, as we move forward and looking at more government-owned DER, is that going to follow the same siting and permitting requirements? How will we deal with bill crediting? There's a whole host of sort of different things, including, you know, the long-term impacts of attracting private capital to New York. Is that helpful? Is that not helpful? What's NYPA's role in all of this? So I just think that as we go forward, we have to really examine all the lessons learned and what we can do, but also what are the perhaps unintended consequences, some good, some bad, and make sure that we're carefully evaluating that. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
Thank you, Chairman. No questions or comments. I'll be supportive. Excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Just one concern, you know, that the coordination between agencies here, if we have, having been working multiple agencies, it's very easy to be siloed off one to the other. So I think coordination at some high level between agencies, lessons learned, pardon me, bulk purchasing, a variety of aspects need to be done, particularly if we're going to do this in some much greater volume. But there is real benefit using the lower cost of capital that state governments have that makes this a much more viable way to get DER accelerated. So, but again, a cautionary tale is, if you really don't know what you're doing in this space, go ask somebody who does.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
No questions or comments. I plan on supporting the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
I also have no questions or comments other than to thank you for the presentation, and I will be supporting the item.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I will now do the call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations to approve the interconnection contract for use with New York State agencies as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Lisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. With that, we will now move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any of the items in today's consent agenda? I'll begin with Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. I have 3 items I want to comment on. Item 262, which is the Integrated Energy Data Resource Program. First, the agenda doesn't make clear that we are looking at approving Phase 2 budgets. Just a technical notice issue for me. However, I do just want to point out, we opened the proceeding initially with the Integrated Energy Data Resource Program back in 2020. I voted for opening the proceeding. There's been a lot of different proceedings that have come from that, including the use of customer data, strategic, the whole host of different orders that came about from that. In March of 2021, the initial sort of implementing the Integrated Energy Data Resource Program was before us. I actually voted no at that time, not because I was opposed to it, but because it was, at that time, it was then Chair Rhodes's last day, and I didn't think it was appropriate for us to be moving forward on a very ambitious program without making sure we had full composition of commissioners, including the chair, because I did see that there would be a lot of clunkiness with sort of having the utilities wind down their data programs to now start up the statewide program, and there was going to be a lot of concerns and issues along the way in how to do it, not even just dealing with the fiscal issues, but the technical aspects. Since then, I think it was sort of proven right by me that there was a lot of clunkiness. There were a lot of needing to figure it out, get back on track, hire, I think, a couple of consultants, one who really engaged with NYSERDA to help work through a lot of these challenges. And now we're here today looking at, how do we deal with the budget issues. There's a lot of really good information, a lot of detailed information on, I think, the significant thoughtfulness that went into this, not just from our staff, but NYSERDA, as well as each of the utilities, in really working through the challenges. The program, the data program, is now actually live. I do think that we're in a different phase, not just with the budget, but we're in a different phase now, which is that before it was mostly, in my mind, sort of back office exercise between the utilities and the vendor through NYSERDA in working through all these challenges to get this up now live. I do think that the jury is probably still out on whether the publicly available data sets will be really of any long-term practical use. I think it's still unknown. I'm not sure, why we necessarily needed to scrap the utility programs and start the statewide centralized program. But it's something for us, I think, now to really be mindful of and look carefully at. And if it's not working, we need to be able to cut the cord, especially because of the value of, of the dollars. And I do want to also make sure that we are not, again, having any unintended market consequences so that, frankly, if you're a business and need certain data, but it's not within this, somehow that's seen as a negative so that you're trying to drive things through this data set that may or may not be really any good to anyone. It may be, but it may not be. So I think we need to be very mindful of accountability and the quality and whether or not this is of any real use. So that's 262. I will be voting for it. The next item is 366. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that I am going to be voting no on this item. I have some concerns. First, kudos to the company. I think that they have done a really good job of laying out, not just in this item, but in all things that, listen, they are for the energy transition, but it's going to cost a lot of money to do this, and it's going to take a lot of resources from a technical perspective. As I look at this item, where we are looking to approve in some limited fashion interim cost recovery for the Idlewild project, it is not lost on me that the main driver of this is to deal with the reliability issue as we electrify significantly. But the main driver is also really to support the MTA and JFK and the expansions and the electrification that they are doing. If these were customers that were private customers and private developers, we would probably be having a more detailed conversation with those customers on the cost allocation that they needed to pony up rather than being borne solely by the ratepayers. I think this order should be examining what this looks like from a cost allocation and cost recovery, because I do not think it is sustainable as we do more electrification, whether it's in this company's territory or other companies, that the ratepayers bear the bulk of this. Plus, we are seeing in real time significant costs for just this very project, but it is just a mirror of many other projects and many other costs that will have to be borne. And we need to really fully evaluate that and fully look at what is it, what are other viable options, and are there other things that we can do in the interim? Which gets me to my larger point. This is being done, $1.2 billion being looked at. This is being done outside of the rate case. Now, in this order, this draft order, it talks about interim cost recovery. It talks about not necessarily approving the project in full, looking at it later. However, it's very unclear. And the reality is that rate cases are where we should be looking at the bulk of this. Now, we just recently had a joint proposal. This is something that, and at that time, our joint proposal, which then led to the rate case, talked about having the company come back with a petition for this capital project. I look very carefully at this, and I think that what's missing for me is a real deep dive into, have we asked the utility to look at, we have the bandwidth within the joint proposal and within the rate case order that we did for them to move around some of their money in their capital projects and prioritize. There's nothing that prevents us from saying, that's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to reprioritize. We'd like you to perhaps just look at the second and third year of your rate case where you're using some of this money to, sort of set the stage for this project, but not the full thing. And then that sort of evaluation of the proper role for this project and where it fits can actually be dealt with in the next rate case, which will give us a much more transparent and comprehensive collaborative process where all stakeholders can weigh in. I was struck by the fact that New York City, in particular, raised a whole host of issues. Frankly, some of them confused me. Some of it kind of looked at, well, what does this mean in light of all of the electrification and the different issues that the city wants to do? And really, for me, what it raised was the need for us to have a more holistic look on what we're doing as we go forward without trying to sort of pigeonhole the utility to come up with the dollars from the ratepayers and do it outside of the rate case. So I am really struck that we're looking at another major project being done outside of the rate case, and consistent with my voting on other items in not just with this utility but other utilities in large dollars being spent for projects outside of the rate case. I think it's concerning because of the huge impact. So I'll be voting no. The next item is 373. Hold on for a second. I just have to get my right notes here. Here it is. So 373 is 20E0197. It's looking at implementing the transmission planning pursuant to the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act. Again, another item where it's unclear exactly what we're doing. This is looking at the ATWG, the Advanced Technologies Working Group, and I'm not unsupportive of this, but I do raise the issues for me when we're looking at this Advanced Technology Working Group. There is a whole host of things that we're doing within the coordinated grid planning process. We opened this case, 20E0197, September 9th, 2021. And we identified minimum objectives of the coordinated grid planning process. We were to improve planning processes to better coordinate the studies performed by the utilities with the ISO's bulk power system. We were to improve the integration of local transmission and distribution in bulk system studies with NYSERDA's renewable generation and storage procurements. We were to improve forecasting of renewable generation development for specific locations on the local transmission and distribution and bulk transmission grid. And over the course of this time, actually, we initiated the first one back in May of 2020, and then September 2021 was really the kickoff of the order in what we were doing with the different phases. But we've had a whole host of different orders: May 2020, September 2021, December 2021, December 2022, August 2023, which was a significant one where we ordered approving the coordinated grid planning process with modifications. We started the EPAC, and so there's a whole host of things. So some of the things that the Advanced Technology Working Group is to do, sort of the goal of it, was to establish a sustainable working group, an R&D program, to help ensure the electric transmission and distribution systems in New York can support the achievement of CLCPA. And so the working group has been meeting and working through, and actually, again, another opportunity, if you look in the record, there's a lot of really good information, substantive information on what the group is doing. They filed a progress report. I think people should be very proud of what I see is a true getting under the hood, working together with a number of stakeholders, and really trying to get through a lot of these issues and technical issues. And The aim was to identify, discuss, and resolve technical barriers and challenges associated with developing and deploying advanced technologies on New York's electric transmission and distribution system. So now here we are today, looking further on what are we doing with the Advanced Technology Working Group, and helping to move the ball forward as well. My only concern is that I worry that there's a lot of missed opportunities in that we are, there's so many different working groups and task force and advisory councils that I feel like people lose the thread. And so even in this order, there was a discussion in the record about what specific issues should be dealt with by the Advanced Technology Working Group, as opposed to, and I'm going to get the acronyms wrong, but IPWG and IT, right? And the reality is that, and so here it's saying, no, those are being discussed there, and so we're not going to discuss it here. The problem I find is that we don't have one document that is really updated regularly, and we don't have that would say these are the, probably by now at least 100 working groups over the years, advisory councils. Some of them are probably defunct, some of them are probably working well, and some probably just are not working well and need a refresh. It would be really nice to have a really good, cohesive document that really gets looked at, in that are the right issues being discussed? Perhaps it could be even put out there from a transparency perspective. What stakeholders are missing? Here we say no to other stakeholders being involved in this working group, but we're going to tell them that they have to be more transparent. I feel like we would do well as a state to, and as a commission, to really help make sure that we are collaboratively working together, and to the extent that one issue is being looked at in one or two different other working groups, doesn't mean it shouldn't get discussed in another working group, but that we have to make sure that somehow it's coordinated and is seamless, and not sort of everybody doing something siloed. So that's only really my 2 cents. Oh, and the other issue is there's a request by, I think, multiple interveners for the working group participants to look at grants, and the draft order says, yes, we agree with that. I do think we need to be really careful, because some of the participants are state entities, as well as some of the people that they're working with are developers and technology developers, that we really need to be careful that we are not picking winners and losers, and also driving money to one thing over another, and seeming to give a signal on what's good and what's not. So I think we just need to be really careful on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Elisi.
I'll be supporting the entire consent agenda without comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Yes, I just want to comment on item 373 as well. The issue of implementation of many, at least proven advanced technologies for transmission, is the cheapest and the fastest way to add capacity to our system. And while I appreciate other technologies down the road need to be examined and and put forward as viable options, that in no way should slow down the progress of what is available today, what we know the industry works, not just in the United States or North America, but worldwide, where many of these technologies have been in place for many years and are providing tremendous benefit to those systems. So in the pursuit of the excellent, let's not leave some really good stuff on the side. So I would just hope that we could encourage transmission owners to adopt these very proven and very cost-effective technologies as quickly as possible. But thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
No comments on any items.
Are you sure?
Positive.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Majori.
I also have no comments on any items on the consent agenda and plan to support the entire consent agenda.
Thank you. Okay, I will now do the call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I vote yes, except for 366, the Idlewild project, I'm a no.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
I also vote yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Madam Secretary, is there anything further to come before us today?
There's nothing further.
All right. Thank you very much. And with that, I adjourn. Thank you, everyone.